God bless you and welcome to the Inspire podcast. I'm here with Emma today.
Hello, family. Welcome. God bless you all. Thank you for watching. And I'm going to go ahead and suggest that you give this video a quick like, comment something that God is doing in your life, and share it with someone that you know it will be a blessing to. And just subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss a single video that we send out.
That's right. And every time you hit that bell, then what happens is that every time we load something, you automatically will know we loaded it, and it'll be a blessing. We take the time out, and it takes a while to get this content to you because we want to make sure that you're getting your life edified with word and you're learning. We've been teaching all this year. Our goal is to teach one book of the Bible every single Sunday until we run through all 66 books. But Emma, what's the complication of trying to pull a whole, you're a preacher, what's the complication of trying to do a whole book of the Bible on one Sunday morning?
There's not enough time.
You can't do it. It's impossible.
Almost impossible. You do it.
Well, honestly, we skim code on it and we go so superficial. I mean, don't get me wrong. We get deep, right?
Yep.
But what I'm saying is that so much content stays out of it. But this podcast is where you get the backstage pass. You get like more info, right? So we thank you for connecting and send your comments. Let us know you're connected. And the month of February, we're going to recap the series. What were the books that we were studying?
We got on Joshua, Judges, and Ruth.
Joshua, Judges, and Ruth. And the subtitle of Joshua, Judges, and Ruth was Warriors of God in the Bible. Now, there's a lot of warriors, but I consider that Joshua was a great warrior of God. I consider that Ruth was a great warrior of God, and I think that Judges were definitely warriors of God. Talking about Joshua, let's jump right into the book. And I want to start with pointing out three very important things about Joshua and why I consider him a warrior of God. And the reason this is important to you is because if you want to be a warrior of God and win spiritual warfare, if you are in any type of battle right now and you want to win spiritual warfare, learn from Joshua. Why? Because Joshua had three things that stood out that made him the great warrior he is. Number one, he was a leader. He was a leader that took the people of God to the conquest of Canaan. He said, guys, follow me. If you want to be a warrior of God, you have to learn to lead. Doesn't mean you're going to lead like everybody else, but you got to learn to lead. Number two, you got to learn to follow God's commands. You can't say you can't say I'm a warrior of God if you're not following God's command. He's your boss. So you got to learn to be faithful and obedient. Joshua did that, especially in the light that he was following Moses. And number three, he was very strategic. He planned. We think that sometimes being a warrior of God has nothing. It's all faith, and it is faith. But don't get me wrong, you have to plan. So I'm going to say it again. If you want to be a powerful warrior of God, you got to learn, just like Joshua, to pull out your leadership. You got to learn to follow God's command and stay faithful to what he told you. And number three, you have to be strategic about the next steps in your life. And we're getting ready to equip you for that. So let's go back into the book of Joshua. Tell me something that you picked up on in that series that you think is worth exploring a little deeper.
You just said it, leadership. I think that one of the key aspects in Joshua's story is how he had to lead the people after such a big figure like Moses. And I think he never would have made it, and this is just a personal take, don't quote me on it, but I think that he never would have made it if he wasn't a good listener and a good follower. He had a good model with Moses. He knew, and he saw Moses listen to God and obey him through thick and thin. And I think that was the key to his many battles and his many conquests all throughout his story. But he was a good leader because he was a good listener.
If you had to pick one of the two, okay, if you had to say, what do you think is one of the biggest flaws why people fail at their leadership and they don't become, because you need to be, if you want to be a warrior of God, you need to be a leader. So let's go back to the root. Why do you think that we struggle so much, especially in the church world? Why do we struggle so much to be that leader? Because people confuse leader with positions, and it's not that. Why are there not more good leaders out there? What would you say?
Well, the first thing is, you said it in the series, is failure to plan. I think a lot of people have a lot of dreams and they don't plan them out, and they die. Then they get frustrated, and that kills a person. Any momentum that they might have accumulated towards something greater, because of lack of strategy, it just dies. And the second thing, just banking off of the leadership, is following God's commands. Because sometimes God will say something, like he was leading Joshua all throughout the story, and God will speak to us maybe through someone else, like you when you're preaching, or a spiritual mentor, and then we think that we know better and we don't follow it according to what God has said, and that deviates our path, and then we end up somewhere else, and definitely not where God wanted us to go.
That's good, Emma. You know that I'm people that work close to me, like you, know that I'm very driven, very plan oriented. I start keynotes, PowerPoint presentations. I start them, and I start them in January, and in February I got 400 slides, 300 slides. I got plans on plans on plans, and I've been criticized by other pastors that are friends of mine. One of them, really close. He says, you're always planning and planning and planning and planning. Sometimes you just got to go by faith. Here's what I believe. I believe because of faith, I plan. Because planning is thinking of what's going to happen ahead without knowing if it's going to happen. So if you want to be a good leader of God, you need to be able to plan because you're planning on something that hasn't occurred. You should plan on your marriage. You should plan on your kids. You got to think ahead. You got to start. And people do not plan enough. They're not strategic. In the church world especially, everybody wants to cop out saying, I got faith, I got faith. If you have faith, you would be planning. Right? You would say, I have faith, I'm going to go on a trip. I have faith, my finances are going to grow. I have faith. Okay, then plan for it. Dress the table up. Right? That's what you should do. Something very powerful about Joshua that stood out to me is that he was trying to build a legacy. Yep. At the end of his life, I love the way he goes out. At the beginning of his life, he's told to be courageous and bold, and to go and to not give up, to not be discouraged. But at the end of his life, I want to read something, and it's out of Joshua chapter 23, verse 1. It says, now it came to pass a long time after, the Lord had given rest to Israel from all their enemies. The war was over, the battle, the warrior was all beaten up, right? He was done. That Joshua was an old man advanced in age. And look at this hero. And Joshua called for all of Israel, for their elders, for their heads, for their judges, for all their officers, and said to them, I am old and advanced in age. You have seen all that look at what he says, verse 3, you have seen all that the Lord your God has done to all these nations because of you. For the Lord your God, it is he who fought for you. Can you think he made it to 110 years old, and Joshua never lost focus. It was God that did what he did. It wasn't man. Something that's going to make you a great warrior of God is when you stop and you say, what I have in my life, it was God. And you tell the children of your children, it was God. Let the story be told. You're supposed to stand up boldly, and yet your generations and your kids and your family and your ministry and the people under you know it was God. It was God. It was God. And when you do that, then you start the right leadership because you're building a legacy. And when you're long gone, they're going to say, it was God. That's what I think.
Perfect.
If you had to talk about one thing that God has done in your life, you would say, man, what is one of the things that you think that God constantly, God constantly shows up in our lives, and he gives us things. He does things for us. For me, he has granted me wisdom when I needed it the most. He always showed up. Another thing is he's always sent help when I needed it the most. I've seen that so many times in my life. What's one thing that you would say, there's a story they should tell about Emma's life and his relationship with God?
Man, every time I think about that, and I don't know if it's a little bit copying what you said, but I think of every time he's been there when I didn't count on him. He's been in my life, protecting me and covering me from a lot of things, even before I surrendered to him, just because of my mom's prayers or my family's prayers. And when I think of his goodness in retrospect, looking back, I'm grateful today because I avoided so many things. He's protected me from addictions. He's protected me from looking at my family and generational curses, from criminality, even possibly jail. You never know, death. And just something that God has always done in my life. He's always protected me, and he's always given me the tools to serve him. So if I do anything good, I always say this, is because he's given me the ability. He's blessed me with whatever I need to do to supply that need. So it's never about me, and it's never about what I can do. It's always about what God can do through me. So whenever people say, for example, something people will always tell musicians is, hey, great job, or hey, that sounded amazing. I have a tendency to never say thanks, because people say thanks, you acknowledge it was your own effort. Mm-hmm. And I always say, no, it wasn't me. Or I always say, no, I would never, because I would never, but God in me, God through me does.
Amen. But God, but God. And if you're watching right now on YouTube, or you're watching this video, or if you're listening, and you get a chance to write, I'd love you to stop. And if you can't even write it, then I want you to think about, what has God repetitively done in your life? In me, it's been provision. In Emma's life, it's been protection. Where have you seen God over and over? I want you to do that exercise, because Joshua became a warrior of God. Warriors of God, to survive the battle, have to go back and remember where God constantly showed up. And I know some of you are thinking, well, he showed up everywhere. Yeah, but where? What is a repetitive circumstance that you say, man, it's over and over and over and over and over? I keep on seeing it, that when you die, you want your kids to remember, you want your family to remember, you want the people to talk about that in your life. What's the legacy of God's showing up in your life? What's the legacy of God showing up? Where has he been kind to you? And now we got to jump to the next book, which is the book of Judges. All right, let's go to the book of Judges. I'm going to let you start this one off.
Judges is one of my favorites for just a single person. Now, just looking at Judges, it was a dark time in the people of God's history. And there came these warriors that came up, and we call them judges, but they're not judges like you and I know them today. They were warriors. And you can see different kinds of warriors, and some of them stood out more than others. But the only thing I can think of when I think about the book of Judges is Gideon. Is one of my favorite all-time stories, and that's why people always ask me, hey, what's up? Hey, how are you? I always reply the same thing, and it's ready. I always say ready, always ready, never unready, because and we can go into detail, and we would spend hours just on Judges and specifically in Gideon's story. But towards the end of his story, you can read it read it at home and look it up if you don't know it. Towards the end, when the army is reduced to 300 people, it was because those were the ready ones. Those were the ones that were always on the lookout and always ready for battle at any given time. And those ready, the ready group, is the ones that got the victory in the end. And they didn't even have to fight. God fought for them. So going into Judges, I would say the key thing is just people rising up in the midst of adversity and just overcoming through God's power.
Yeah, I love the fact that you said that, and I want you to come back with that, because I know it looks like I'm interviewing you, but I got questions for you. I always put you on the spot. I make them nervous that, because you don't know, we don't script this, like this on the spot going. All right, I want you to think about why Gideon. Out of 12, there's 12 judges in the Bible, and why Gideon? I loved in this series, when we spoke about all the judges, what I did was the three famous, which are Deborah, Gideon, and Samson. I avoided them, and I went to the ones that nobody talks about, like Ehud, Othniel, and Jephthah. And I went to them because they did things. One, Ehud, I love what he did. He was left-handed, and what he did was that he took a knife and he put it in his thigh, and he hit it to be able to go in, and he won a war when nobody expected him to win a war. And like you're saying, the judges were people. Here's what people don't get. First of all, like you said, the judges were not the judges we know. People think they're sitting in a rock and just talking to people. No, they were actually military warriors, and they were there for this sole purpose, to deliver the people of God from oppression. And what you need to understand in your get ready is that right now, the reason you have to be ready is because God wants to use you to free the people that surround you. In Judges chapter 21, verse 25, it says, in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. When a society starts doing whatever's right in their own eyes, when you say, I'm going to do it because I think it's all right, and you don't care what the word says, it's going to bring chaos. And we live in a world of chaos because everybody wants to do whatever the heck they want nowadays. They don't want to use the Bible, right, as their constitution. They don't want to use the Bible as their guide. So then when the world goes whack on us, it goes whack because they don't want to follow guidelines. There's so many rules. Well, there's rules in everything in life, right? And here's what we need to understand. What we need to understand is, in the midst of chaos, Judges, God will pick people for certain things. God will pick them. And I want to go back to the question. And while Emma answers it, I want you to answer it online if you could chat, or I want you to think about it. What is God picking you for? And why? Now we're going to go back to Emma, and I'm going to ask him on Gideon, because watch how I relate his answer to what I just said. Why Gideon? I know you mentioned something, but why him specifically? What stands out the most to your heart emotionally?
Because when God presented himself to Gideon, Gideon was in the wrong place, doing something he thought was right, under his own logic, and God chose him, and he, questioned him a little bit. And I think that's how God found me. I was probably in the right place. I wasn't doing anything wrong, but God still found me, and he reached out to me, and I accepted him into my life. And it's not been the same since, but it's one of the first stories from the book of Judges that I read, and I really early on assimilated it into my life, because I found myself to be in similar situations all throughout my life, and not just literally facing maybe opposition in the form of armies, but maybe facing spiritual opposition, maybe facing something that I needed to make decisions on, anything, whatever it was. I always found myself assimilated to this story because of how his life turned out is similar to how mine did. And I never want to be, and I never want to hear that I missed out on a blessing or an opportunity that God had for me because I wasn't ready, or because I had my own excuses. I always want to be available.
I'm going to give you, watch this. There's a Emma moment. All right. There's an Emma. I'm going to give Emma an Emma moment, but it's so you could watch it at home and so you could be paying attention to this. All right. The reason I asked Emma that was because, are you an overthinker?
Yes.
When you overthink a lot of stuff, on our leadership podcast, I have a leadership podcast if you ever want to hear it. And on the leadership podcast, I teach a lesson like that. Overthinkers have difficulty taking risks. When you said Gideon was in the wrong place doing the wrong thing, in the story, Gideon is overthinking. And when you read that, I think you find yourself in it and you're saying, I don't want to be that guy. I want to be ready. That's what you said. Be ready.
Yep.
I want to be ready. I want God to use me. And I have seen in your life how you've done that. The reason I'm sharing this with everybody that's watching online right now is because you got to be careful you don't leave God's coverage. The judges come into existence because God sold them. That's what the Bible says. He sold them. When he says it's makar, that's what I taught in one of the classes. God said, here's how it works. The Bible says that the angel of God, his wings cover you, right? And what happened was that they decided, we'll do it our way. We know better than you. And they were uncovered. They overthought it. They thought their way was better. When you think your way is better, I'm going to say it again. When you think your way is better, you may find yourself in a drought and not knowing why you feel the way you feel. And it's because you left God's coverage. Run back to him. And what Emma's saying is, I want to be close. I want to be in the right place at the right time. And you can't become paranoid about it, but you got to fight for that. And that takes us to the book of Ruth. Let's talk about the book of Ruth for a minute. In the book of Ruth, now when we come to the book of Ruth, you may be thinking, well, wait a minute, Pastor. You subtitled this series Warriors of God. Ruth was not a warrior. If you know the Bible, like, she was just a regular woman. Deborah, she was a woman warrior in Judges. Joshua was a warrior. I mean, these people went to battle. They fought battles. But what type of warrior is Ruth? Ruth is the type of warrior that we most need nowadays. She was a warrior, watch this, fighting all type of thoughts in her head that would avoid her from being what God called her to be.
Yep.
She was a woman of loyalty and of devotion. And the story of Ruth is about loyalty and it's about devotion. It's about when you're loyal to God, God is loyal to you. He will, when you run to God and you say, listen, no matter what you're going through, if you are faithful to God, you say, I'm going to be faithful to God, I'm going to trust him, God is going to be faithful to you. God will not let you down. Ruth lived that. From poverty. You know, the famous portion in Ruth is Ruth 1:16, and it says, Ruth replied, she told Naomi, don't urge me to leave you or turn my back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. And I love that portion because this woman is so loyal to her mother-in-law. And then she says, your God is going to be my God. And then she was loyal to God. This woman, through storms, through trials, through spiritual attacks, through famine, through need, she kept loyal to God. She was a spiritual warrior. I want to speak to every spiritual warrior out there right now that's listening or watching. I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what you're living at this moment. I don't know if it's a ministry trial. I don't know if you're overwhelmed, but whatever it is, listen to me well. Listen up. I'm telling you right now, keep on fighting the battle because your God will provide your need according to his riches in glory. Do not stop now. Hebrews 10:23, and look at this version. You've heard this portion before, Emma, but look at this version. It says, don't stop now. We must hold on to God's promises. I'm speaking to you. You must hold on to God's promises that we have said we believed. If you said you believed it, hold on to it. And we must never let go. He has promised and he will do it. He has promised and he will do it. I'm telling you that if God promised it, he's going to do it. Let us think of one another and help others. Get serving, because if you love others and you help others, you're trusting God, saying, I'm not worried about myself because God's going to take care of me. It's time for a shift in your season. It's time for a shift in your life. You keep on pushing. Do not stop going to church and meeting. That's what verse 25 says. Do not stop gathering like some do. Keep on going. This is a word for you. Keep on going because the days of the end are coming closer and closer. And what you need to do is be loyal, because loyalty pays off. Loyalty pays off. Emma, wrap us up with the book of Ruth.
I think one of the key takeaways for me is what came from Ruth. Like after her, what came out of her, it's a great legacy. I think God bless her faithfulness and her being firm in the face of adversity, because something you mentioned at the end of last week, or could have been 2 weeks ago, you'd have to go into the sermon and see. But something that you mentioned is from Ruth came David, and out of that genealogy came Jesus. So I think that she was blessed with a great legacy because of how faithful she was. Amen. And that comes all the way up to today.
That's right. So if you're faithful today in something simple, you may not even see it, but someday you're going to break open the floodgates of heaven. It's coming down on you and everybody around you. And that's why we do
what we do.
What we do. We're here to bless you. And I want Emma to give one final word to anybody that's watching out there of encouragement, any warrior of God out there. With all this series, how would you cap it up and give that person one sentence to their life that you would say, hey, speak to them right now? Go ahead.
Our battle is not against flesh and blood. We might not fight armies, but we still fight daily. We have to stand firm, just like Ruth. We have to fight just like the judges, and we have to be great leaders wherever we go, just like Joshua.
Amen. I'm Pastor Carlos. He's Emma, and we're blessed to be an inspired podcast with you. We want you to subscribe. And if there's a blessing to you in any way, let us know in your comments, because when you share that and you follow us and you like it, it gives us to give more content and you're spreading the word. We just want you to get deeper in the word. We want to inspire you. We want to help you. We want you to break bondage for God's glory. This is the Inspired Podcast, where we go deeper in what's occurring on Sunday mornings. And every now and then we bring a special episode, which is one that's coming up pretty soon. But every beginning of the month, connect, follow us, and it's going to be a blessing to your life. For now, get ready.
Get ready. Get ready.
God bless you.